the question is there an America first foreign policy without Donald Trump on board? Can this critique survive and have legs among the GOP base if Trump himself is doing the opposite thing?
Welcome to Global Dispatches, a podcast for the foreign policy and global development communities and anyone who wants a deeper understanding of what is driving events in the world today. I'm your host, Mark Leon Goldberg. I am a veteran international affairs journalist and the editor of UN Dispatch. Enjoy the show. As the Israel-Iran conflict continues to escalate, there is a very distinct possibility that the United States may enter this war on behalf of Israel and directly attack Iran. If Donald Trump follows through on his threats, it would lay bare a major rift within Republican foreign policy. Until recently, the America First wing seemed ascendant, sidelining more hawkish elements of the party. But that dynamic may now be shifting. My guest today is Andrew Prokop of Vox, who recently wrote a deep dive into the GOP's foreign policy divide. In our conversation, we explore the history of these two Republican camps and how the debate over Iran is playing out now. We also discuss the potential domestic political fallout that would follow from the United States entering into yet another war in the Middle East. This is very much a critical moment. Our conversation offers a clear and timely look at the politics behind a possible new American war and what it could mean for the future of Trump's presidency and for American politics. We recorded our conversation live via Substack. I've really enjoyed doing more and more of these live streams, and I love when you join these live streams and watch along. You can do so by signing up for a subscription at globaldispatches.org. Most of the live streams are available for free, but then I subsequently email the live stream out as soon as it's done to a smaller list of our paid subscribers who get access to this immediately. Go to globaldispatches.org and get a subscription and help me keep on doing what I do. Thank you. Now here is my conversation with Andrew Prokop of Vox. We are speaking on the afternoon of Tuesday, June 17th, and it looks to me like the United States is poised to directly launch an attack on Iran. Really, these are fast-moving developments over the last few hours, really over the last 10, 12 hours. We've seen several things to suggest that a potential U.S. strike is imminent. I hope I'm wrong, but we saw yesterday Donald Trump leave the G7 summit in Canada a day early to attend a National Security Council meetings at the White House. We've seen several social media posts from Donald Trump over the last really few hours, again, suggesting a strike may be imminent. He called on the people of Tehran to evacuate. He called on Iran to, quote, unconditionally surrender, whatever that means. And he, not so indirectly threatened the life of Ayatollah Khamenei in a post saying he's not ready to kill him yet, but who knows what might happen in the future. All this, plus other recent developments, which you and I will discuss, suggests to me that a U.S. strike on Iran is really potentially imminent. And in future episodes, I'll go through the geopolitical implications, the regional implications of this. But for the purposes of our conversation today, I wanted to talk about the domestic politics of this. I mean, foreign policy flows directly from domestic politics. And there has been a vibrant debate and discussion within the Republican Party over America's place in the world, over America's foreign policy broadly, but also on this very specific, this question of whether or not to bomb Iran. And I'd love to kick off by having you just broadly explain what are the two main camps that are engaged in this intra-Republican Party debate.
Yeah, so in a way, this is just the latest flare up of this long running tension on the right between one group, which you can think of as hawkish interventionists. They want to be big and bold on the global stage. They're suspicious of America's enemies abroad. They're willing to use or threaten, or in some cases, use force against them. And then on the other side, you have the isolationists who say, oh, are we getting involved in these far off conflicts that'll just get Americans killed? What does this do for the United States of America? We shouldn't get involved in this stuff. Really, since World War II and the Cold War pretty firmly put the hawks in charge in the Republican Party, and the isolationists were really kind of a minority faction that would, there were some of them around, but they weren't very influential or important. And so this continued after 9/11, seemingly confirming again all of the Hawks' dire warnings that, like, if we don't go abroad in search of monsters to destroy, then Americans are going to get killed at home. And really, it was Trump who opened the door to more criticism of this hawkish worldview when he first ran for president in 2015 and 2016. He started saying the unsayable, which was that the Iraq war was a failure, the war on terror wasn't working out. And it's tough to remember now, but that was just considered a complete taboo in Republican circles to say that.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the public had turned against the Iraq war and was souring on the war on terror by that point. But inside the Republican Party, there's just such strong pressures to both be supportive of George W. Bush's policies and legacy, and also to criticize Barack Obama for not being tough enough, for being too weak, and so on. And Trump did plenty of that, but he also criticized Bush and the Republican establishment. He criticized the war on terror as a failure, and he had these instincts that were in some ways, but not others, we'll get to that, more in line with the old isolationists. He was skeptical of these foreign troop commitments to NATO, to certain areas of Asia. He viewed those issues in more economic terms. He felt like those countries were like ripping us off by like having our troops there to protect them. They weren't paying us enough. They weren't spending enough on their own defense. But in his first term, I would say he was really quite a traditional hawk when it came to policy. When it came to rhetoric, he was willing to say, oh, Vladimir Putin isn't so bad, but his administration's actual policy towards Russia and Putin and Ukraine was quite a hawkish one. He was definitely hawkish on China, and then on Iran, he of course pursued maximum pressure, culminating in the assassination of the head of the Revolutionary Guards, Qasem Soleimani, in early 2020, which was the first time it really looked like there might be a possibility the U.S. would go to war with Iran under President Donald Trump. But he stepped back from the brink then. And what was going on in that first Trump administration, I think, is that the hawks were just the default in Republican foreign policy.
And they were staffed by hawks to a large degree. Mike Pompeo, John Bolton. And then you had the so-called adults in the room, which, were people from the Republican Party establishment, which, as you noted earlier, was generally like a hawkish kind of leaning.
Yes, he picked these notable hawks to staff his administration, but also like the whole Republican Party staffer class is just like hawkishness was just the way Republicans thought about foreign policy. There wasn't, especially if you wanted to make a career out of foreign policy, but also quite a lot among the base as well. What I get into in my article is the role of Tucker Carlson and other people on the right. Steve Bannon plays a role too in trying to kind of change this consensus by making a public argument that by giving Republican, MAGA, Trump-loving base voters kind of a new way to think about these foreign policy issues that's not just on the terms of, oh, are we being tough enough or are we being too weak? And instead being like, oh, Like their preferred frame when they see a conflict like Putin's invasion of full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, they go right to, oh, is this another neocon plot to drag us into a forever war again? Or in that case, not even a forever war, like a world war, a nuclear war. And after October 7th, when Israel began its war in Gaza, the America Firsters, which I think is kind of the best term for this faction, people have a lot of different names for them, but I think that's a term with a lot of history. It goes back to the World War
Mhm.
eras. I think it kind of describes what they're trying to do pretty well. They were a bit split on whether to support Israel or be a bit more skeptical
Mhm.
about involvement. But when the conversation changed to become, okay, Israel is preparing for a serious attack on Iran, which is the change that happened about the end of last year. That's when the America Firsters really got a bit more engaged of, okay, we need to kind of try to push back against this.
Yeah.
And there was a real battle over foreign policy appointments in the Trump administration, a very bitter battle involving leaks, involving attempts to get people fired, actual firings of
Yeah.
people between these hawks and these America Firsters. The America Firsters are more associated with J.D. Vance, with Donald Trump Jr. Donald Trump Jr.'s friend, Sergio Gore, is head of the Presidential Personnel Office. And he apparently took on a big role in keeping out neocons from the administration. And then on the other side, you had like various hawks complaining about certain America Firster appointments saying, oh, they're too weak on Iran. They're willing to live with a nuclear Iran. And this was a conversation about Elbridge
Yeah.
Colby, who's now the top policymaking official at the Defense Department. When he was up for confirmation, he had to backtrack a little to get confirmed. So there were these bitter disputes. And initially, it seemed like the America Firsters had the upper hand because
Well,
Trump
that's what I was
was
going to say.
pursuing
It
those
seemed like,
negotiations.
yeah, I mean, it seemed like as of time of publication of your article yesterday, the American Firsters really did have that upper hand. You saw like National Security Advisor Mike Waltz pushed out. He was very much on the hawkish side of things. And you had, a real meaningful attempt by the Trump administration to negotiate directly with Iran on its nuclear program. But yet, over the last 24 hours, the vibe has totally shifted. And now it seems the American firsters that seemed ascendant in Republican and Trump administration foreign policy making circles have been pushed aside. And if indeed Trump does launch this seemingly incipient American attack on Iran, it seems to me that that would pose a really major political fissure in Republican Party politics. I mean, one question I have for you is, as someone who, studies DC politics day in, day out, I mean, one remarkable thing about Trump, love him or hate him, is that he has had this really solid grip over the Republican Party, both elected leaders and the base. This decision, if it indeed comes to it, seems to me like it will split both the elected leaders and potentially the base as well. I mean, how do you see the politics of that unfolding over the coming days and weeks?
It's a bit of a cop out, but I think it really depends how well it goes, exactly what it is and how well it goes.
That's actually kind of
Because,
my answer as well, right?
yeah,
If it is like the reason the United States is being drawn into this war is kind of a technical military one. Only the United States has the capacity to deploy these bunker buster bombs that might eliminate Iran's nuclear facility at Fordo, which is buried like deep in the ground. Israel can't do it on its own. It has to be an American mission. So if there is a strike, that would be the heart of the strike. If that strike is successful, then who knows? Maybe they will rally around it. But I did see Thomas Massey, at least, a very conservative Republican from Kentucky, is now leading a measure in Congress to impose like a War Powers Act to try to restrain Trump.
yeah, I think, the most hardcore of the America Firsters, the most ideologically committed, they are going to oppose this. And you have seen open sniping between Tucker Carlson and Trump in recent days. And
Yeah.
Carlson, I should mention, is just an incredibly important figure here,
Yeah.
not
And you
only
interviewed
because
him at length for your article. So
they
just
interviewed
kind
him
of
at the beginning of
articulate what's he
June.
saying? Yeah. What's he saying about American foreign policy, and at what like role is he playing both in potentially stirring up the base, but also in like kind of inside baseball as well?
People talk about Tucker Carlson and JD Vance and Don Jr. having formed kind of an alliance and having worked really closely together to influence administration personnel and so on. And so, Tucker Carlson's not just like a guy who like says provocative things or offensive things on his show. He is very connected to top figures in the administration, behind the scenes. He's very plugged in on all these conversations. And he was viewed as a good ally for Trump, and Trump was following his advice a lot of the time until very recently. So when I talked to him, it was kind of on the precipice of this. And now I think in retrospect, I do see signs in our conversation that he was worried that this was slipping away. He said his view on what's going to happen in Iran changes by the minute, by the hour, and he's hearing a lot of things, and some are disturbing. What he told me was that he didn't believe the core argument, which was that the world is not a safe place if Iran goes nuclear. That's the core argument of the hawks, that like we must and should and can stop Iran from going nuclear. He kind of disagreed with all three of those things. That he thought that it would, in practice, be a disaster. He warned that a war in Iran would be a disaster. It wouldn't stay in Iran. It would spiral outward, that there would be long-tailed, unpredictable consequences that would be bad for America and bad for the world. But he also said that, in his view, it wouldn't really be such a bad thing if Iran got a nuclear weapon. He said, well, Pakistan has nukes and like they are an Islamic regime, and what's the big deal? I understand that Israel has security concerns, but the logic of deterrence still works, and that basically that the consequences of actually launching a war would probably be worse than just learning to live with a nuclear Iran.
You're articulating what Tucker Carlson told you, but by and large, this is also a worldview, as you noted. It's shared by JD Vance, who, has a front row seat to all this. And what's been remarkable over the last few hours, frankly, is how JD Vance, I don't know if you've been following what's happened, but he's been, posting on social media, but he gave like a very long and equivocal post on Twitter, formerly, ex Twitter, basically backing whatever Trump does, but expressing certain qualms. And it's just fascinating to me that that foreign policy view that he had articulated, that kind of more American first, more restraint one, is now just like out the window. And I just wonder if you have this kind of split between, you have the vice president that's associated with a certain set of policies, and you have the president who's pursuing another set of policies. I just wonder what downstream split that suggests about the Republican Party going forward.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because in retrospect, we saw a preview of this when the Signal chats leaked about the Houthi strike, because in that chat, pretty much everyone was gung-ho for a strike except JD Vance and maybe one or two other people. JD Vance was saying, I don't know, guys, maybe we should just wait a month. I'm not sure that this would be a good idea. And the other people are like, fist, America flag, fire emoji,
Yeah.
and they went forward with it. And then it seemed like it didn't go very well, or wasn't viewed as very successful. It was viewed as expensive, not really achieving much. And so it was presented to me as I was reporting this as, oh, this was kind of a defeat for the Hawks. Like it was a short-term win. They got what they wanted, but in the end, they were kind of discredited. But now the same thing has happened again with Iran, with this, apparently, according to the New York Times piece today, was pretty much Netanyahu saying that he was going to go ahead with this and basically daring Trump to try and stop him or to get on board in some fashion. And then, like, at first, he was a little unsure how closely he wanted to associate himself with this. But the more successful it looks, the more he wants to be associated with it and take credit for it. So each new Truth Social post, like, seemingly gets us one step closer to actually being involved in this war, or at least signifies that Trump's own mind is shifting toward having this meeting today in the Situation Room, which apparently he's going to make some sort of decision.
And which apparently J.D.
Notably,
Vance,
yeah.
exactly. That's like a really important caveat here that J.D. Vance is not taking place in this critical meeting of the National Security Council. He's going to be in Congress, presumably like rallying support for the decision he knows that's already been made. And so it's really just like, I think, a fascinating dynamic that we're seeing playing out. I guess my question to you over the coming days, assuming the United States really does go ahead with this strike on Iran in some capacity, what political fallout are you looking towards? Well, like what will suggest to you in terms of individual Republican leaders whose statements you'll be following, actions that Republicans might be taking, actions that like the Republican base or leaders of the base like Tarkin Carlson may be taking over the coming days should this happen? Like what are you monitoring? What are you watching for?
Well, really, the support for the America First faction is strongest kind of in the MAGA influencer space and sort of MAGA non-Fox conservative media. Like the Murdoch publications have been very pro-attacking Iran, and Fox News has been championing the war, basically. But then you have Bannon and Carlson complaining about it from the outside. People like Charlie Kirk, conservative influencer who heads a Turning Point Action, this like young conservatives group, pretty close to Don Jr. He's been pretty skeptical about what's happening in his public comments. And the question is there an America First foreign policy without Donald Trump on board? Can this critique survive and have legs among the GOP base if Trump himself is doing the opposite thing? If Trump himself is going to war, there's going to be a lot of pressure among the party to stand behind him, to defend his positions, to make him look good. And you are going to look like you are kind of a traitor to the cause of Trump, which is, of course, the most important cause in Republican politics today, if you say anything bad about it. So Trump is already deriding kooky Tucker Carlson. And J.D. Vance, as you mentioned, had that tweet today about like stuff he's seen on social media, trying to push back against some of these grumblings from the MAGA right. Yeah. So they are seeing these grumblings. The question is whether people just stomach their complaints and fall in line. And as we said earlier, I think that just depends on how it goes. If this looks like a disaster, if things take a turn, then we might see some more of that dissent rising. But if it is the constantly promised cakewalk, then, they're just going to say, oh, the Hawks were right. Tucker will look like Chicken Little instead of looking like Cassandra, if you would.
There's this old adage that foreign policy doesn't make a presidency, but it could break a presidency. And I think you're exactly right. Like what I'm looking for is if this goes sideways, or even if it doesn't, will you see a fissure in the Republican base for once? Will they separate like the man from the idea? And will they start to, express doubt? And like you said, I think it largely has to do with how this goes, which is kind of an unsatisfying answer, but I think it's probably the right one.
Yeah, really just the history of foreign policy, this tug of war between the isolationists and interventionists on the right is like which side kind of screwed up more recently and which side is viewed as their policies actually working out. Like when Pearl Harbor happens, then it's like, oh, the isolationists really screwed that one up. And so the interventionists are in the lead. Same thing with 9/11. When the Iraq War goes badly, then the critics of the Hawks gain traction and these critiques start to sink in. And so, yeah, it is unsatisfying because the future is uncertain, but it really is kind of this reaction to what happens on the ground, which is there is this realm of ideas, this debate of big ideas and ideological visions that happens, but then there are actual events on the ground in reality that those ideas will bump up against, and we'll see if they can withstand them.
Andrew, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to Global Dispatches. The show is produced by me, Mark Leon Goldberg. It is edited and mixed by Levi Sharp. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts, make sure to follow the show and enable automatic downloads to get new episodes as soon as they're released. On Spotify, tap the bell icon to get a notification when we publish new episodes. And of course, please visit globaldispatches.org to get on our free mailing list, get in touch with me, and access our full archive. Thank you.